William Powell seemed to have it all: fame, fortune, and Hollywood's perfect image. But when his butler unlocked a forbidden wing of his mansion, a different story emerged. Hidden wills, secret payments, million-dollar lawsuits, and a heartbreaking family tragedy lay buried in the shadows. Now, 40 years later, we're finally learning what America's most sophisticated star fought to keep hidden until his dying breath. William Powell was born on July 29, 1892, in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the only child of Nettie and Horatio Powell. His father was an accountant, and his family lived a stable, middle-class life. But things changed in 1907 when they moved to Kansas City, Missouri. That's where everything started. In high school, Powell found something that excited him: acting. His parents wanted him to become a lawyer, but he was far more interested in performing on stage. He acted in school plays and, whenever he could, went to vaudeville shows with his mother. Those performances left a deep impression on him. He wasn't just watching actors, he was imagining himself up there. His parents still pushed for law school, so in 1911, Powell enrolled at the University of Kansas. He lasted exactly 1 week before dropping out. The idea of sitting in a courtroom for the rest of his life? No chance. He knew he had to be an actor, but dreams cost money. He took a job at the Kansas City Telephone Company, hoping to save up for acting school. It wasn't enough. Desperate to make it to New York, he turned to his wealthy aunt and asked for a loan. She agreed, and in 1912, he finally enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, AADA. Powell trained hard, studying alongside future stars like Edward G. Robinson. By 1913, he had graduated, but getting a job in theater wasn't easy. He took whatever roles he could find: small parts in traveling shows, performing for tiny audiences. It wasn't glamorous, but it was experience. For nearly a decade, Powell struggled. He performed in stock companies, moving from one city to another. But things changed in 1920 when he landed a role in Spanish Love, playing Javier. The show ran for over 300 performances, a huge success that got him noticed. Hollywood came calling. William Powell was still a newcomer when he landed a role in When Knighthood Was in Flower, 1922, a massive historical drama about Henry VIII's court. It was the most expensive film ever made at the time, costing a staggering $1.5 million. The sets were enormous, the costumes were extravagant, and they even built a full-sized royal barge just for one scene. The whole movie revolved around Marion Davies as Mary Tudor, but Powell, playing the scheming Francis I of France, managed to steal attention. Even though he was stuck playing villains in those early years, his performance hinted at something bigger. The film itself was a spectacle. Some scenes were even shot at Windsor Castle, and critics were blown away by its sheer beauty, calling it one of the greatest achievements of the silver screen. Powell wasn't a leading man yet, but Hollywood was watching. A few years later, he proved just how powerful his acting could be. In The Last Command, 1928, Powell played Leo Andreev, a bitter film director seeking revenge. The story followed Sergius Alexander, a once powerful Russian general who had lost everything and was now just another Hollywood extra. Emil Jannings played Alexander and won the very first Academy Award for Best Actor. Powell's character, Andreev, hires him for a role, not as a favor, but as payback for something that happened during the Russian Revolution. The film wasn't just about revenge, it also exposed the cruelty of Hollywood, showing how the industry could turn someone's downfall into entertainment. Powell's performance was intense. He didn't need flashy gestures or over-the-top expressions. Just a glance or a small shift in his tone was enough to show the weight of his character's emotions. This film helped him transition from being that guy in the background to someone who could lead a scene. When Hollywood transitioned from silent films to talkies, many actors struggled. Their voices didn't match their personas, their accents were too thick, or they simply lacked the vocal control needed for dialogue-heavy films. Powell had none of these problems. His deep, smooth voice and stage training made him one of the few silent stars who actually benefited from the change. His first sound film, Interference, 1928, showed that not only could he handle dialogue, but his voice actually enhanced his performances. Then came The Canary Murder Case, 1929, his first starring role. He played Philo Vance, a sharp, sophisticated detective investigating a murder. The film was originally shot as a silent movie, but halfway through, the studio decided to convert it into a talkie. That was a disaster for some of the cast, but for Powell, it was the perfect opportunity. His voice fit the role so well that the transition felt seamless. seamless. This role changed everything. Powell had spent years playing villains, but now he was the leading man, smart, smooth, and in control. The movie was such a hit that it led to 3 sequels, cementing his place as a Hollywood star. But behind the scenes, things got messy. Louise Brooke, who played the murder victim, refused to return for the sound reshoot. The studio had to dub her lines with another actress, and the controversy hurt her career. But Powell, he walked away, untouchable. If anything, the film only made him more popular. William Powell had a way of lighting up the screen, but part of his magic came from the leading ladies who stood beside him. His on-screen chemistry with Kay Francis was undeniable. They worked together on 6 films, including Jewel Robbery and One-Way Passage, both released in 1932. Francis once called Powell a grand adventure to work with, and their partnership captured the elegance of early Hollywood before the strict movie censorship rules took hold. Their films were stylish, sophisticated, and full of charm. Then there was Carole Lombard. Powell and Lombard first teamed up in Man of the World and Ladies' Man in 1931, but their connection went beyond the camera. They fell in love and got married that same year. Their relationship was a whirlwind. Lombard, only 22 at the time, was free-spirited and full of life, while Powell, at 38, was more reserved and intellectual. Despite their differences, they seemed to balance each other at first, but over time, their personalities clashed. They divorced in 1933, realizing they were simply too different. Even so, they never stopped caring for each other. Their friendship remained so strong that they reunited professionally in My Man Godfrey, 1936, a screwball comedy classic. Their playful, sharp-witted performances won over audiences, and their real-life history made their characters even more compelling. Powell also had an unforgettable connection with Jean Harlow, the dazzling blonde bombshell. They starred together in Reckless, 1935, and Libeled Lady, 1936, but their real-life romance was even more captivating. Harlow adored Powell and called him Poppy. He gave her a stunning sapphire ring in 1936. Not quite an engagement ring, but a symbol of their deep bond. Despite their 19-year age gap, they were deeply in love. But their story took a heartbreaking turn. While filming Saratoga in 1937, Harlow became seriously ill. At first, doctors thought it was the flu or a gallbladder issue, but it was far worse. She was suffering from kidney failure, a complication from scarlet fever she had as a child. Powell stayed by her side as her condition worsened. On June 7, 1937, at just 26 years old, Harlow passed away. Powell was devastated. He arranged and paid for her funeral and made sure fresh flowers were always placed at her grave. He never truly recovered from losing her. Nick Charles, played by William Powell, became one of the most famous characters in film history when The Thin Man was released in 1934. He was a retired private detective who had married a wealthy woman named Nora Charles, played by Myrna Loy. Nick was smart, charming, and always had a drink in hand. His character came from Dashiell Hammett's novel, but Powell made him unforgettable with his smooth delivery and sharp humor. Some even said Powell was to dialogue what Fred Astaire was to dance. Myrna Loy wasn't the studio's first choice for Nora, but director W.S. Van Dyke insisted on casting her. He even tested her personality by pushing her into a swimming pool at a party to see if she could handle surprises like Nora would. Powell and Loy had instant chemistry, and their playful, equal partnership on screen changed how marriage was shown in movies. Audiences loved watching them work together, solving mysteries while teasing each other along the way. Their dog, Asta, became just as popular as they were. Even though fans believed Powell and Loy were a couple in real life, they were just close friends. Loy later said they were too similar for romance, but their partnership still became one of Hollywood's best. The success of The Thin Man was unexpected. MGM didn't think much of the film and only gave it a small budget. It was shot in just 16 days, but it became a huge hit, earning an Oscar nomination for Best Picture. Audiences in the middle of the Great Depression loved its mix of humor, mystery, and glamour. The movie did so well that MGM made 5 sequels. After The Thin Man, 1936, Another Thin Man, 1939, Shadow of the Thin Man, 1941, The Thin Man Goes Home, 1945, and Song of the Thin Man, 1947. The series never lost its charm, though some say the first 3 were the best. The movies stayed popular because they always kept what people loved most: Nick and Nora's quick quick-witted conversations and exciting cases. Even famous actors like James Stewart appeared in the sequels before becoming a star himself. By the time the series ended in 1947, The Thin Man had become one of Hollywood's most successful film franchises. It made William Powell a top star and showed that Myrna Loy could do both comedy and drama. The movies made millions, which was a big deal at the time, and they're still considered classics today. The way The Thin Man mixed mystery with humor and romance influenced detective films for years to come. Powell and Loy didn't just work together in the Thin Man movies. They made 14 films together, starting with Manhattan Melodrama in 1934. Their partnership was so strong that many people thought they were a real-life couple, but in truth, they were just great friends. Loy once said that acting with Powell was easy because they understood each other's rhythms so well. They could bounce lines off each other effortlessly, making their performances feel natural. Their films outside The Thin Man included Libeled Lady, 1936, and Love Crazy, 1941, proving they could shine in any genre. What made them different from other on-screen couples was how they made marriage look fun. At a time when most movie relationships were full of drama, Nick and Nora were equals who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. This was rare in Hollywood back then, and audiences loved seeing a married couple who were both clever and playful. Their last movie together was The Senator Was Indiscreet, 1947, where Loy had a small cameo. Even though they never worked together again, their legacy lived on. Critics still talk about them as one of the greatest screen duos of all time. Before The Thin Man, Powell was already well known for playing detectives like Philo Vance, but it was Nick Charles that truly changed his career. The role let him show off his humor without losing his smooth, elegant style. It became what he was best known for, and he even earned his first Oscar nomination for Best Actor because of it. He was always cast as a refined, witty leading man after that. In My Man Godfrey, 1936, William Powell played Godfrey Park, a man who went from being homeless to working as a butler in a rich but chaotic family. The movie, directed by Gregory La Cava, was a big success, both with critics and audiences. It earned 6 Academy Award nominations, including one for Powell as Best Actor. It was also the first movie to get nominations in all 4 acting categories, though it didn't win any awards. Powell's performance was special because he made Godfrey both funny and deeply human. At a time when many people were struggling during the Great Depression, his character's journey from being forgotten by society to finding purpose resonated with audiences. The movie wasn't just comedy, it had a strong message about class differences and wealth. Powell also showed professionalism behind the scenes by insisting that his ex-wife, Carol Lombard, be cast as Irene Bullock. Even though their marriage had ended, he knew she was perfect for the role, and their chemistry on-screen made the movie even better. That same year, Powell starred in The Great Ziegfeld, 1936, where he played Florenz Flo Ziegfeld Jr., the famous Broadway producer known for his extravagant stage shows. This film was one of MGM's biggest productions ever, filled with grand musical numbers and over-the-top sets. The most famous scene, A Pretty Girl is Like a Melody, cost an enormous $220,000 to make, which would be millions in today's money. More than 1,000 people worked on the movie, proving how much MGM was willing to spend on spectacle. The Great Ziegfeld won 3 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, though Powell himself didn't get nominated. Even so, his performance was praised for capturing Ziegfeld's mix of charm, ambition, and personal struggles. While Louisa Rayner won Best Actress for playing Ziegfeld's first wife, Powell's role was a huge part of what made the film so memorable. It remains one of the most extravagant Hollywood movies of its time. In March 1938, just a year after losing Jean Harlow, William Powell was diagnosed with rectal cancer. At the time, cancer treatments were still developing, and his future was uncertain. He chose an experimental procedure where radium pellets were implanted into his body through platinum needles. It was a new and risky treatment, but he had no better option. For 6 months, he endured the grueling process, unsure if it would work. By 1940, the cancer was gone. He had survived, but the battle left him physically and emotionally drained. Hollywood didn't see him for over a year. He needed time to recover, not just from cancer, but from the grief that still weighed on him after Harlow's death. People started to wonder what had happened to him. His agent tried to keep things quiet, telling the press that Powell was only dealing with minor surgeries and routine recovery. But in reality, he was fighting to regain his strength, both physically and mentally. Even during this difficult time, he carried himself with dignity, never seeking public sympathy. Years later, when he finally spoke about his illness, he helped open up conversations about cancer, a subject that many still considered taboo. His survival was not just a personal victory. It was proof that medicine was advancing, even in an era when a cancer diagnosis often meant the end. When Powell finally returned to acting, he did it in a way no one could ignore. In 1947, he starred in Life with Father, a film based on Clarence Day Jr.'s memoirs about growing up in a strict yet loving household in Victorian-era New York. Powell played Clarence Day Sr., a father trying to maintain control over his lively family. The role was a perfect fit for him. His mix of sharp wit and warmth made the character both stubborn and lovable. Audiences loved it. Critics praised his performance, calling it one of his best. It earned him his third Academy Award nomination for Best Actor. The movie itself was a huge success and became one of Warner Brothers' biggest productions of the late 1940s. It was funny, heartwarming, and full of charm, exactly what post-war audiences wanted. For Powell, this movie was more than just another role. It was proof that he was still at the top of his game, even after everything he had been through. Amidst all this, Powell found something he never expected: true and lasting love. In January 1940, he shocked Hollywood by marrying actress Diana Lewis after only 3 weeks of dating. People thought it wouldn't last. Powell was 47, had been through 2 divorces, and had suffered the devastating loss of Harlow. Lewis was 27 years younger, full of energy, and nicknamed Mousy because of her small size. The odds were against them, but they didn't care. They got married at Hidden Well Ranch in Nevada and started a new life together, away from Hollywood's chaos. Unlike many Hollywood wives, Lewis gave up acting after their wedding. She didn't need the spotlight. She wanted to focus on her marriage. Their love only grew stronger over the years. Powell often said she saved him, giving him the happiness and stability he had been missing for so long. Lewis once said she loved him more with each passing year. William Powell's later career showed that even in his 60s, he hadn't lost his charm. In How to Marry a Millionaire, 1953, he played J.D. Hanley, a rich widower who falls for Lauren Bacall's character, Shatsa Page. The movie was about 3 women trying to marry wealthy men, but Powell's role was different. Instead of being a foolish older man chasing youth, his character was wise and kind. He truly cared about Shatsa and wanted to make her happy, but in the end, he stepped aside, believing that their age difference might not work. Even in a light-hearted comedy, Powell added depth and emotion, proving that his acting had only become stronger with time. His final movie, Mr. Roberts, 1955, was another perfect role for him. He played Doc, the ship's doctor, who acted as the voice of reason during World War II. Surrounded by big stars like Henry Fonda, James Cagney, and Jack Lemmon, Powell didn't need flashy moments to stand out. His performance was quiet but powerful, showing wisdom and warmth in every scene. Off-screen, his health was already declining, making filming difficult, but he still delivered one of his most memorable performances. It was a fitting farewell to a career that had lasted for decades. After Mr. Roberts, Powell shocked Hollywood by announcing his retirement at 63. His decision wasn't just about age. His health had been a challenge for years. In 1938, he had battled rectal cancer and undergone experimental treatment, and by the 1950s, his body was slowing down. During Mr. Roberts, he struggled to remember lines and found the long shooting schedule exhausting. The decision to retire wasn't easy, but he knew it was time to step away. Powell and his wife, Diana Lewis, moved permanently to Palm Springs, California, where they had bought a home in 1941. Unlike many Hollywood couples, they stayed together for over 40 years, living a peaceful life away from the spotlight. They enjoyed golfing, cycling, and spending time with friends at the Racquet Club, a famous hangout for Hollywood stars like Marilyn Monroe. Diana, nicknamed Mousy, had left acting shortly after they married, choosing to focus on their life together. Their love was real, lasting until Powell's passing in 1984 at the age of 91. Their Palm Springs home, still standing today, remains a symbol of their lasting bond. His portrayal of Nick Charles in the Thin Man series alongside Myrna Loy set a standard for sophisticated comedy, one that actors still admire today. Even stars like George George Clooney have credited Powell as an influence, inspired by the way he blended elegance with relatability. Myrna Loy once said, "There's nobody like him. There's never going to be anybody quite like him." She was right. Powell didn't just act. He defined an era of Hollywood that valued wit, grace, and timeless charisma. William Powell had a son named William David Powell. On March 13, 1968, William David ended his own life. He was 43 years old and hurt himself badly while standing in the shower. This violent act showed just how much pain he was in. Before he died, he wrote a 4-page note to his father. Only 2 lines from the note were ever shared with the public. He wrote, "Things aren't so good here. I'm going where it's better." These words showed his deep sadness, but left many questions about his struggles. William David was fighting many battles. He had bad depression and serious health problems like hepatitis and kidney issues. These problems forced him to stop working. He had once been a writer and producer for big TV shows like Bonanza and Rawhide. Even though he was good at his job, his health got worse, and his sadness grew. His father, William Powell, was heartbroken by his son's death. William Powell lived until 1984, but losing his son left him deeply wounded forever. Most of William David's note stayed private. His father chose not to share it. This made people wonder what else was in the letter. Did he say more about his pain? Were there messages meant just for his father? No one outside the family knew. William Powell was always a quiet and private man. After losing his son, he talked even less about his personal life. William Powell's estate held shocking secrets. Just before he died, he set up something called a Charitable Lead Annuity Trust, or CLAT. This trust was supposed to give money to a foundation while he was alive, and after that, the rest would go to his family. But there was a big problem. Powell died just 1 week after creating it. That made people suspicious. It looked like a last-minute trick to avoid taxes. The U.S. tax court didn't buy it. They said Powell still had control over the assets through his family business, so everything in the trust still counted as part of his estate. That meant his family had to pay millions more in taxes than they expected. This decision sent a wave of panic through estate planners everywhere. Powell's estate had more problems. His lawyers tried to lower the value of his assets by saying they were hard to sell. They applied a 25% discount, hoping to pay less in taxes. But the IRS said no. They argued Powell still had too much control, so there was no reason for a discount. The court agreed, making it clear that sneaky tax tricks don't always work. But that wasn't the only issue. His financial records had strange payments between 1989 and 1993. No one could say for sure if they were gifts or business payments, which only led to more trouble. Instead of being simple and well-organized, Powell's estate was a tangled mess. Publicly, Powell had always seemed like a man of integrity. He was known for being generous and successful, but his estate told a different story. His company had been sued for asbestos-related health problems. For years, his company sold products containing asbestos, even though it was dangerous. Workers who got sick took legal action, and Powell's company had to pay millions in settlements. That didn't match the image people had of him as a responsible businessman. Then there was the CLAT. People expected him to be charitable, but the way it was set up made it look more like a tax trick than an act of generosity. Even his family life wasn't as perfect as it seemed. After he died, his family started fighting over money. Some of them claimed he had been pressured into changing his will at the last minute. Instead of a loving, united family, there was mistrust and legal battles. But the biggest surprise was who got money and who didn't. Powell's family did get a lot, but some close relatives were completely cut off. These were people who had once been important in his life. No one knew exactly why, but it seemed like there had been family conflicts or outside influence. Meanwhile, unexpected people showed up in his will. Charities got large sums, but because of the CLAT, people wondered if it was really about charity or just another tax move. Some longtime employees and business partners also got money, which made people question how much influence they had over Powell in his final days. Powell even put a rule in his will. Anyone who tried to fight it would lose their inheritance. He thought that would stop family drama. It didn't. The people who were cut off went to court anyway, saying he wasn't in his right mind when he made those decisions. The legal battle went on for years. His family fought to change the will. The IRS fought to collect more taxes. The court ended up agreeing with the IRS. They said Powell had tried to move money around to avoid taxes, but it didn't work. His estate had to pay over $5 million.